Hello everybody, my name is Rachel Hewish. I'm Public Affairs Manager at BVRLA and welcome to this video interview. I'm joined today by Beverley Wise from Webfleet Solutions. Beverley has spent more than 30 years in the motor industry with LeasePlan, Lex Autolease, and for the last 4 years with Webfleet Solutions as the UK and Ireland Sales and Marketing Director. She is passionate about providing businesses with solutions that will improve their efficiency, improving employee engagement, and helping to generate revenue to the customer's bottom line. Webfleet Solutions, formerly known as TomTom Telematics, is one of the world's leading telematics solution providers dedicated to fleet management, vehicle telematics, and connected car services. Its main software as a service solution, Webfleet, is used by businesses of all sizes to improve vehicle performance, save fuel, support drivers, and increase overall fleet efficiency. Webfleet Solutions has over 50,000 customers worldwide and services drivers in more than 100 countries. Thank you, Beverley, for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you, Rachel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Last week, the government announced its plans to accelerate the ban of the sale of new internal combustion engine vehicles to 2030. What are your thoughts on this new target for the ban?
I think, it's obviously great to see the ambition and us in the UK leading the way in terms of climate improvement and carbon reduction. I think it's also great to see that we're actually at last trying to deal through innovation with the cleanup in cities and particulate reduction as well. However, and there's always a however, I think there's some very challenging timelines in there for the UK to be able to deliver this, mainly in terms of sort of manufacturers with the production and being able to provide the choice for fleets and drivers. So the different variants, I think at the moment you've got a number of models, but their whole fleet that they're producing is not necessarily covering every variant. I think one of the challenges at the moment is really around the total cost of ownership for businesses. I think we've seen certainly much more of a leveling in terms of price for electric vehicles, but I think sort of without really understanding the timeline and plan for the taxation part of that total cost of ownership, it's a little bit difficult for fleets to be able to see what an electric vehicle is going to cost them in sort of 5-10 years. And I mean, I know it's 2030, but a lot of fleets have obviously committed to moving their fleet to electric or hybrid electric over the next sort of 5 years. But I think I think it's admirable, but I think there's a lot as yet that they don't know. And so therefore it's difficult to plan and understand what that total cost of ownership is going to be. I think one of the challenges that we have in the UK is actually the charging infrastructure. If we're going to deliver on the 2030 promise of not selling any more internal combustion engine cars and vans by that time, then we've got to have a rapid step up in the charging infrastructure. I think we don't at the moment have one unified charging provider. So we've got a lot of companies fighting for that space, but it's not unified. I haven't seen the plan for that. I don't think probably anybody has in terms of that. I think home charging is a question as yet to be answered. Again, admirable that we want to do this, and more consumers are looking to get on the electric journey. But I think if you're in the middle of a city, which is obviously one of the areas that we really do want to target, or is wanted to be targeted in terms of particulates, then how do you actually charge an electric vehicle if you're living in a block of flats or maisonettes, etc.? Not every home is going to be able to have a charging point outside. And these are all things that need to be built into the plan and the timeline, which I think is challenging to deliver in 10 years. And then if you look at businesses, how do they then actually sort of map their journeys and their maps to make sure that they're able to have sufficient charge every day for those vehicles? And then the big thing, I think, is the road tolls that have been suggested around the tax take for the government. If the road fund licence is effectively going to be eliminated through electric vehicles and they're not going to be charging road tax, then they're going to move to the road toll. And yet we have very few areas already set up with tolls. So I think there's a lot to be done, and would probably be my summary. A lot of areas to cover, and not just around the sale of electric vehicles.
No, that's definitely kind of tallies with some of the stuff that we're hearing from members as well. Thanks, Beverley. That's a really good overview. Just to pick up on some of the points then that you've just been making. So, for example, with road user charging and charging infrastructure, those kind of challenges that are coming up. What role do you see for telematics to sort of support with that?
Yeah. Well, I do think sort of the information that we as a telematics provider can take from the engine around, the start time, the journey distance, the miles that the vehicle has actually travelled, can help an awful lot in terms of the road tolls, and being able to feed that back into businesses, possibly so that they can make payments to the government a little bit like they do with P11D or carbon footprint reporting. So I think there is absolutely a role for telematics and connected cars to be able to play to help companies provide accurate information on the number of miles that their company vehicles have actually driven, so that they're not paying too much, or also that their drivers are not having to necessarily pay every time they come to a road toll, or not getting that sort of bill at home for the vehicle that they're then having to pay and reclaim. So I think there is an awful lot that telematics providers can do, and this is one of the sort of areas that we constantly look at for development, as to how can we be in advance of this, and therefore provide businesses with that sort of streamlined automation that helps them become efficient and also compliant.
No, absolutely. And looking more broadly at the transition to electric vehicles, again, what sort of what are you doing as Webfleet Solutions to help with that transition and to guide people?
Well, I think with the recent announcement, again, we were already and have already developed electric vehicle data points within the vehicle to be able to take data from electric vehicles and be able to portray it back to customers around driver behavior, about battery usage, about length of charge, etc. But I think this further sort of pushes us to develop even further and into those sort of areas about being able to provide customers with reports around road usage, etc., and miles. We already do that, but I guess it's an adaptation of that to provide them with what is required. The EV market has definitely accelerated this year, probably as a result of the pandemic and people seeing that they're not driving as many miles as maybe they did before. And I think the pandemic has definitely changed or accelerated that sort of digitization and automation of processes. I mean, the fact that we're doing this interview via Zoom is an exact example. The team meetings that we're having, the number of prospect meetings that you're having, I think this has really accelerated the fact that we can do business over the air, and we don't necessarily have to always be face to face. So I think companies will look and see what they actually need. And I think what we can do is really help companies in the future look at, which vehicles may be able to be shifted sooner into an electric vehicle, and be able to help them monitor things like the battery life, the distance, and then overlay the charging points so that they can help their drivers understand where they can get those vehicles charged. And then probably even take it one stage further by overlaying that, especially for sort of LCVs, to actually look at how a driver can take their rest time or their coffee break or their lunch break at a time and at a place where maybe the vehicle can be recharged. So actually you can overlay that into I guess, orders or a workflow within a workflow management system that can be fed into the telematics and therefore into the driver, and helps with their driver well-being as well. So it reduces that anxiety. So I guess that's all the sort of things that we're looking to develop and bring forward quickly.
That all sounds really smart and really interesting, given sort of, like you say, that sort of move that we've been having this year, especially. That's all really interesting moves forward. Are you finding that the data that you use and you collect for internal combustion engines is different to the sort of data that's being used for electric vehicles? And
yeah I think yeah, the key data points are the same, such as sort of number of miles driven, the driver behavior, how they're driving, you know, are they driving quickly, slowly, harsh braking, harsh steering. I guess what we have done is through the technology is actually take and converted the sort of miles per gallon to the kilowatts per hour on an electric vehicle, so that actually when you're measuring a fleet of vehicles, you can actually measure the whole fleet and actually convert it so that you can see, you know, what the running costs are of an electric vehicle compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle. So the data points are pretty much the same. The bit that we've had to do is obviously look at the battery life. So we've had to take a data point there. We've had to look at obviously the kilowatts per hour as opposed to miles per gallon. So we've had to look and work that through. But the other key underlying points are exactly the same. I think the other bits that we're doing, and we do a release every quarter of new developments in the EV market. So we're looking at sort of based on your driving style, how long will it be before you need to recharge your engine? And if you're doing 120 miles, for instance, or your next journey is 120 miles, what do you need in your battery to do that? And how often would you maybe have to top up? Because the battery life is obviously generated by the use of things like air conditioning or heating or wipers, etc., and also driving style. So it's looking at how much you're using and therefore how much will remain. And I think it's really important, especially if you're running a fleet of vans and they're out doing jobs every day, that you're, as a fleet manager, able to see what your fleet is doing. And, you know, are you going to run out of charge, or be able to build that into the workflow for the drivers, so that, again, the last thing you want is somebody to run out of charge with 2 or 3 jobs to go. So it's really important. And I guess the piece is, it's probably more important around planning, you know, and especially as we build up to 2030, where there will be more charging points. There's more charging points coming every day, more public charging points. But also, I think if you're considering this and you have depots around the country, it's considering whether or not you put your own charging point at your depot, and can you plan your journeys to incorporate a stop at your depots to recharge the battery, and therefore you're paying electricity rates at your rate, not at a publicly generated rate. You know, it's a little bit like, do you use the motorway service stations and pay the price per pump there, or do you try and do it more to ones that are more local and therefore more cost effective for you? So we'll be able to provide all that sort of information, and, you know, whether or not those charging points are free, how long it will take, what the price per kilowatt is, and all that sort of thing. And those are the things that we are then accelerating to be able to allow companies to plan.
Yeah, that's definitely that anxiety around where am I going to charge seems to be one of the big sort of barriers at the moment, and that's obviously a really great advancement to addressing that concern.
And I think it's also about, you know, is that charge point free? Because, you know, if you turn up and you've got to wait for somebody to charge, which could be a half an hour wait, you haven't scheduled that into your day, and it's maybe not so critical for for passenger cars and maybe but people who are using a commercial vehicle to do a schedule of drops or deliveries or work in that day, it becomes imperative. And that actually increases anxiety on the driver, which creates stress, which then means that they don't drive as consistently. And it absolutely has a knock-on effect. And one of the key things that Webfleet Solutions do, and what we're really passionate about, is actually looking at the driver well-being. I think never more so than now, it's really important to consider your drivers and their well-being and how you look after them. They are a very important commodity to your business, and you want to make sure that you are looking after them as well as you can, and especially in this day and age, reducing the levels of stress that you can. So the smoother you can make their day, the better it is for you and for them. That's
a really positive message as well. I think that we all sort of can take away from that as well, is definitely agree that you need to think about drivers' well-being.
Yeah.
I think you've obviously outlined quite a lot of what you've been doing this year and the sort of developments that you're bringing forward. Obviously, 2020 has been a particularly challenging year for many businesses. I think it goes without saying. And it sounds like Webfleet Solutions, you've been really busy at looking at ways to support. Is there anything else that you're doing? Anything you're adapting with products or services to support specifically with business recovery for 2021, and what do you think could be the biggest challenges for next year as well?
Okay, so this is my opinion in terms of what I've seen out there in the marketplace, but I think 2021 will be very much the year of getting to grips with the future. The news over the last couple of days with vaccinations being announced and is really positive, and it's great to see that. But I do think next year, as we come out of this pandemic and businesses start to get back to whatever the new normal is, we'll really see them starting to understand what they as a business have to do. I think at the moment they're finding it really difficult to plan. I know I am. You have to plan as 2021 as being if you like, a proper year of trading. And none of us knows. So I think we've been very reactive. We've had to be. That's not just Webfleet Solutions, but I think every business has had to be very reactive. I mean, we've worked and we've delivered a commercial mobility dashboard, which actually looks at the different sectors and how they've been affected in terms of miles driven over from March right the way through to now. And the UK in particular has been significantly affected against some of our European colleagues. I mean, probably the country that sort of mirrors the UK the most is Spain. We've seen certain verticals, obviously such as travel, have been significantly affected. Professional services have been affected. Construction did have a dip, but has come back up pretty much to pre-COVID levels in terms of driving. I'm talking about. But the one that has obviously sort of probably got back to that and recovered really quickly was the logistics. So things like food delivery, we've probably not delivered more. We've delivered more Amazon Prime parcels this year than ever before, because people's habits have changed. They've had to change to be able to get that. So we're constantly looking at that to review the different verticals and how they're affected. We're looking at seeing how flexible we can be with regards to shorter contracts, because I think the thing that this has done has actually accelerated that automation of processes within businesses. And I think this is where we can really help and really work with companies to see how we can actually streamline the whole of their business and make it almost COVID secure, if you like. So you're not having to hand off paper, that you can automate those touch points that you would have previously had. And by doing that, sort of looking at how we can work with our customers. And I think the key for all of this is listening to them and working with them to help them deliver their objectives. Because actually, if we help them deliver their objectives, we'll be in this for the long haul and not just, here today and gone tomorrow, which is not what we want to do. We want to be a sustainable business that helps our customers grow, because then that means that we grow. So I think, you know, for us, it's about doing that. We want to welcome people into the world of telematics. So, you know, we're looking at what we can do with maybe with self-installed plug and play, especially for the passenger car and sort of like commercial vehicles. The plug and play gives people the opportunity to try telematics and understand the benefits that they can get from that before maybe moving on to a sort of fully installed. So we're looking at doing much shorter contracts on that to give people the ability to trial on that and then come back to us.
Thanks, Beverley. That's a really positive sort of message for next year as well, I think, of, you know, like you say, the new normal, but
yes.
yeah, and whatever that might be next year.
Yeah.
But it's a really positive way of looking at it and seeing a sort of proactive approach to supporting. So thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Thank you.
I found that really fascinating, and I'm sure that everybody else will as well, having listened today. Really interesting, especially what your advancements that you're creating as a company as well going ahead. So thank you so much for sharing your insights today, Beverley.
Thank you, Rachel.